On a crisp August morning in 1628, the harbour of Stockholm was alive with anticipation. Banners fluttered, cannons boomed, and thousands of citizens lined the shores to witness the launch of Sweden's most magnificent warship, the Vasa. She was a floating fortress, a symbol of royal power, and a testament to the ambitions of a young king who dreamed of making Sweden a dominant force in Europe. Her hull was painted in vivid reds and golds, her stern adorned with hundreds of sculptures depicting gods, heroes, and mythical beasts. She carried 64 bronze cannons, more than any ship of her size, and was meant to strike fear into the hearts of Sweden's enemies. Yet just minutes after setting sail, as a light breeze filled her sails, the Vasa heeled sharply to port. Water rushed through her open gun ports. Within moments, she sank in full view of the stunned crowd, taking with her at least 30 souls and the pride of a nation. For over 300 years, the Vasa lay forgotten in the cold, dark waters of Stockholm harbour, preserved by the Baltic's low salinity and lack of shipworms. Then, in 1961, she was raised in one of the most remarkable maritime recoveries in history. Today, she stands not as a sunken relic, but as a complete, awe-inspiring museum ship, the best-preserved 17th century vessel in the world. This is the story of the Vasa, from the king's grand vision, through the fatal flaws in her design, to her miraculous resurrection and enduring legacy. It is a tale of hubris and haste, of art and engineering, of tragedy and redemption. And above all, it is a story about what happens when ambition outpaces wisdom. So settle in, dear listener. Let the gentle lap of Baltic, waves and the whisper of history carry you back to an age of kings, cannons, and a ship too beautiful to sail. To understand the Vasa, we must first step into the world of early 17th century Europe, a time of religious war, imperial rivalry, and rising nation-states. It was the fin to the 30 Years' War, 1618 to 1648, a brutal conflict that pitted Protestant against Catholic and reshaped the map of Europe. Sweden, under the young and fiercely ambitious King Gustavus Adolphus, sought to position itself as the leading Protestant power. Though a relatively small kingdom, Sweden had rich iron and timber resources, a disciplined army, and a growing navy. But naval power required ships, large, heavily armed warships that could dominate the Baltic Sea, a crucial trade and military corridor. Denmark, Poland, and the Holy Roman Empire were all rivals. Sweden needed a fleet that would not only fight, but intimidate. Gustavus Adolphus was a military genius, but he was also a micromanager. He involved himself in every detail of his army and navy, from tactics to ship design. In 1625, he ordered the construction of 4 powerful warships. 2 were to be built in Stockholm, 2 in the naval shipyard at Älvsnabben. The flagship of this new fleet would be the Vasa, named after the king's own royal dynasty, the House of Vasa. The pressure was immense. Sweden was at war with Poland, and the king needed these ships now. Speed was prioritized over caution, and in that rush, the seeds of disaster were sown. The Vasa was built at the Stockholm shipyard on the island of Skeppsholmen, under the direction of the Dutch master shipwright Henrik Hubertsson. Hubertsson was a seasoned builder, but he was working under extraordinary constraints. The king's specifications were exacting and contradictory. He demanded a ship that was long and narrow, for speed, high-sided, for boarding defense, heavily armed with 2 full gun decks, richly decorated archer as a symbol of royal majesty. These requirements created a fundamental instability. A ship with 2 gun decks was rare for its size. Most contemporary warships had only 1. The extra weight high in the hull, cannons, carvings, and tall superstructures raised the ship's center of gravity dangerously. Construction began in 1626, The keel was laid first, made of sturdy oak. The frames were bent into shape, and the hull planked with pine and oak. Over 1,000 large oaks were felled for her construction, enough to build 500 houses. But in 1627, tragedy struck. Henrik Hybertsson fell ill and died. His assistant Hein Jakobsen took over, a capable man, but without the authority to challenge the king's demands. When stability tests were conducted, by having 30 sailors run from side to side to simulate rolling, the ship rocked so violently that the test was halted for fear she would capsize. Yet no one dared tell the king. The decorations were another matter entirely. Over 700 sculptures and reliefs adorned the Vasas, roaring lions, the symbol of Sweden, Roman emperors, biblical figures, mermaids, and grotesques. They were painted in bright colors, reds, blues, golds, and gilded with real gold leaf. The cost of the artwork nearly equaled that of the ship itself. By March 1628, the Vasa was ready. She was a masterpiece of Baroque art and a disaster of naval architecture. What did the Vasa look like, and why did she fail? She was 69 meters, 226 feet, long from bow to stern with a gee beam width of 11.7 meters, 38 feet. Her height from keel to mainmast was over 52 meters, 170 feet, taller than a 15-story building. Yet her draftigst depth below waterline was only 4.8 meters, 16 feet, making her top-heavy. Her displacement was about 1,210 tons, and she carried but 64 bronze cannons, 48 heavy 24-pounders on the lower deck and 16 lighter 3-pounders on the upper deck. This was an extraordinary armament for a ship of her size. Most ships her length carried 30 to 40 guns, but the cannons were mounted too high. The lower gun deck was only 1.2 meters, 4 feet, above the waterline, and the gun ports were left open during the maiden voyage, a fatal error. Her sail plan included 10 sails on 3 masts, giving her a theoretical top speed of 8 knots. But her high stern castle and forecastle created enormous wind resistance, acting like a sail in the wrong direction. The crew numbered about 150 sailors plus 300 soldiers meant to board enemy ships. There was no room for error, no margin for instability. In essence, the Vasa was designed to look powerful, not to be powerful. She was a propaganda tool first, a warship second. On Starke Dieu, August 10th, 1628. The Vasa was ready for her maiden voyage. The day was calm, the sky clear. A crowd of thousands gathered along the shores of Stockholm harbor. Cannons fired salutes. The royal standard flew proudly from her mainmast. At around 4 p.m., the order was given to set sail. The Vasa glided slowly from her anchorage, her sails catching a light southerly breeze. She passed the royal palace, where the king's sister watched from a window. Then, as she entered the open channel near Beckholmen, a sudden gust of wind filled her sails. The ship heeled sharply to port. Water poured in through the open lower gun ports. She righted herself for a moment, then heeled again, more severely. Within minutes, she was on her side, her masts crashing into the water. Chaos erupted. Sailors and soldiers scrambled to escape. Some drowned in the heavy wool uniforms of the era. Others clung to wreckage. Of the estimated 450 people on board, at least 30 perished. A miracle it wasn't more, given the speed of the sinking. The ship settled in 32 meters, 105 feet of water, her masts still visible above the surface for a time. Salvage attempts began almost immediately. Divers managed to recover 50 of the 64 cannons, using primitive diving bells, but the hull was too deep, too fragile. By the 1660s, the Vasa was forgotten, buried in silt and memory. In the days that followed, a formal inquiry was held, the Vasa inquest. Remarkably, no one was punished. Why? Because everyone knew the truth. The king himself was ultimately responsible. To blame a shipwright or an admiral would be to blame the king's own orders, and Gustavus Adolphus was too powerful and too beloved to be questioned. The official report concluded vaguely that only God knows why the ship sank. The shipyard records were sealed. The Vasa became an unspoken embarrassment, a symbol of overreach, quietly erased from official histories. Gustavus Adolphus never saw the Vasa sail again. He left for the 30 Years' War in Germany and was killed at the Battle of Lutzen in 1632. The Vasa remained on the harbor floor, a silent ghost beneath the waves. For over 300 years, the Vasa lay undisturbed. Then, in 1956, a Swedish amateur archaeologist named Anders Franzén became obsessed with finding her. Using historical records and a homemade coring device, he located the wreck in the busy shipping lanes of Stockholm harbor. What followed was a 5-year salvage operation, one of the most complex in maritime history. Divers dug tunnels beneath the hull and threaded steel cables through them. On April 24, 1961, the Vasa was raised in front of a live television audience and a crowd of 20,000 people, miraculously intact. But the work had only begun. The wood, waterlogged for centuries, would shrink and crack if dried improperly. A team of scientists developed a polyethylene glycol, PEG, preservation process, spraying the ship with the chemical for the latest 17 years darkest to replace the water in the wood cells. Thousands of artifacts were recovered: clothing, tools, coins, human remains, even a sailor's shoe with his foot still inside. These objects offered an unprecedented glimpse into 17th century life. In 1990, the Vasa Museum opened on Djurgården Island in Stockholm. Today, it is one of Scandinavia's most visited museums, with the Vasa as its majestic centerpiece, 98% original wood, towering over visitors in all her tragic glory. The Vasa is more than a ship. She is a parable. In engineering schools, she is studied as a classic case of poor stability design. In management courses, she exemplifies the dangers of top-down pressure and lack of communication. In art history, she is a Baroque masterpiece frozen in time. She has inspired books, documentaries, and even an opera. Her story is taught in Swedish schools as a lesson in humility. A popular saying in Sweden is, "Don't be a Vasa," meaning don't let pride override practicality. Unlike warships that sank in battle, the Vasa's tragedy was entirely preventable. She is a monument not to heroism, but to human error and to the courage it takes to learn from it. The Vasa never fired a shot in anger. She never won a battle, never protected a convoy, never sailed beyond her home harbor. And yet, she may be the most important warship in history, not for what she did, but for what she teaches us. She reminds us that beauty without balance is fragility, that ambition without expertise is danger, that silence in the face of authority can be catastrophic. Today, as you stand beneath her towering stern in the quiet halls of the Vasa Museum, you can almost hear the whispers of the past, the chisel of the carver, the hammer of the shipwright, the gasp of the crowd as she went down. She is not just a relic, she is a conversation across centuries. And in her we see not just the folly of a king, but the timeless struggle between vision and reality, between what we dream and what we can safely build. So let her rest not in shame, but in honor. For the Vasa did not fail us. She saved us from repeating her fate. And as the Baltic wind sighs through Stockholm harbor, her story sails on.